My blood froze the second I saw him. There he was, standing in the center of my daughter's engagement party, flashing the same devastating smile that had once fooled me. My champagne glass slipped from my hand, shattered against the marble floor, and the sound cut through the music like a warning bell. Every guest turned to look, but I could not move. My breath caught, my heart pounded, and my mind screamed at me that the ghost of my past had walked straight back into my life. My name is Eleanor Brooks, but everyone calls me Ellie. I am 65 years old, a retired librarian who thought she had survived the worst already. Yet in that glittering room overlooking Seattle's Lake Union, I knew I was standing on the edge of a storm. Because the man holding my daughter's hand, the man she proudly introduced as Nathan Cole, was none other than Daniel Price. The same man who had drained my life savings 7 years earlier, back when I was vulnerable and grieving. I forced myself to smile, to pretend, but deep inside I whispered one truth to myself. This time I was not the same broken widow he had fooled before. Seattle's skyline glittered outside the tall windows, the reflection of city lights spilling across the polished floors. The party was elegant, filled with lawyers, business leaders, and friends from my daughter's firm. It should have been a night of joy, but for me, every detail felt like part of a stage Nathan Cole had built to impress. My daughter, Lauren Brooks, 32, had worked tirelessly to become a partner at her law office. She was radiant that night, laughing with colleagues, her eyes shining with the thrill of being in love. To her, Nathan was everything she had hoped for. To me, he was a predator in a tailored suit. Then there was Jenna Park, Lauren's closest friend since college. She hugged me warmly when she saw me, whispering how lucky Lauren was to have found such a devoted man. I could not bring myself to agree. I simply nodded, my smile fixed in place. And Nathan, ever the charmer, moved from guest to guest with flawless ease. He remembered names, asked the right questions, laughed at just the right moment. To everyone else he was magnetic. To me he was dangerous. I had seen those rehearsed tricks before, and I knew what they meant. 7 years earlier, in 2018, my life had been crumbling. My husband, David, had died suddenly of a heart attack, and I was drowning in grief. I moved through my days like a shadow, clinging to small routines, desperate for anything that felt steady. That was when I met him. Back then, he called himself Daniel Price. I first saw him at a small coffee shop across from the grief counseling center I attended once a week. He was kind, attentive, and carried just enough vulnerability to make me believe he understood my pain. He bought me coffee, asked about my husband, and listened with an intensity that felt rare in a world that had already moved on from my sorrow. Over the next 10 months, Daniel made me feel alive again. He praised my strength, told me I was beautiful, reminded me that life could still hold promise. When he spoke of an investment opportunity safe, steady, perfect for securing my future, I believed him. I handed him $78,000, almost all that was left from David's life insurance. Within weeks he was gone. No calls, no trace, no money. That betrayal carved a wound I thought would never heal. Back in Lauren's living room, I forced myself to watch Nathan with clear eyes. He was polished, confident, and endlessly charming, but I knew better than to be swept away. Every smile was too perfect, every story too well practiced. When a guest mentioned their new business, Nathan leaned in with interest, offering a clever insight, as if he had spent years in the same field. When another talked about their children, he nodded warmly, remembering each name as though they were old friends. Lauren beamed at him, her face glowing with love. She slipped her hand through his and announced proudly that the wedding was set for October 15th, less than a month away. Guests clapped and cheered, but my stomach tightened. The date was far too soon, and Nathan looked far too eager. As the night wore on, he moved through the crowd like a conductor leading an orchestra. Everyone played along, unaware of the performance they were part of, but I noticed the cracks. The way he avoided questions about his past. The way he answered just a little too smoothly when someone asked where he had grown up. To everyone else he was perfect. To me he was a collection of red flags. That night, long after the party ended, I sat in my kitchen with only the hum of the refrigerator for company. My hands trembled as I opened my laptop. If Nathan Cole was who I thought he was, there would be clues. There are always clues. I typed his name into search engines, scanned business registries, and checked social media. At first glance, everything looked pristine, too pristine. Every record I found began in January 2020. Business licenses, tax filings, rental agreements, each one neatly starting from the same date, as if he had simply appeared out of thin air. Before that, there was nothing. No college photos, no job history, no friendships captured online. For a man in his 50s, that was impossible. I scribbled notes onto a pad, drawing arrows and timelines. My chest grew tight with every missing piece. The more I searched, the clearer it became. Nathan Cole was a mask, and if I was right, Daniel Price was the face beneath it. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. If I confronted him too soon, I risked losing Lauren's trust. I needed proof. Hard proof. And I knew exactly who could help me find it. The next morning, I called Sandra Ruse. She came highly recommended by a friend who had once needed a quiet background check before a family wedding. Sandra was in her early 50s, sharp-eyed, and known for seeing through polished facades. When we met at a small diner on the outskirts of town, she slid into the booth across from me and wasted no time. I spread my notes in front of her, the timelines, the gaps, the two perfect records. She studied them, then nodded slowly. "You were right to be suspicious," she said. "A profile this clean doesn't happen by accident. It usually means someone has been manufactured." 2 days later, Sandra returned with a folder thick with documents. She tapped the cover. "Here's the problem. Nathan Cole exists only from 2020 onward. Everything is neat, polished, and consistent. Too consistent. But before that, she flipped open the folder and slid a photo toward me. My breath caught. The face staring up at me was the same man, only this time his name read Daniel Price. He hadn't just stolen my money, he had stolen a new identity, and now he was standing in my daughter's home. Sandra did not stop with the photo. She laid out 3 more files, each marked with a different city. I traced his movements, she explained, her tone flat but steady. After vanishing as Daniel Price in 2018, he re-emerged as Nathan Cole, and every couple of years he leaves behind another broken life. The first file was from Phoenix, 2020. A woman named Aisha Patel, a 36-year-old tech executive who had just sold her startup. She lost her inheritance and disappeared from the business scene after a sudden broken engagement. The second file came from Nashville, 2022. Monica Delgado, a 38-year-old widow with a large insurance payout. Her accounts were drained right before her wedding was called off. The third file was from Denver, 2023. Paige Turner, 34, inherited her grandmother's jewelry business. Within weeks of meeting Nathan, the business was gone. Sandra's eyes met mine. "It's a pattern, Eleanor. Women between their late 20s and late 30s. Quick engagements, sudden disappearances, assets missing." I stared at the photographs, my throat tight. Lauren was 32. A perfect fit. My daughter was walking straight into the same trap I had barely survived. The following Sunday, Lauren invited me to dinner at her townhouse. Nathan had insisted on cooking, presenting an elaborate Italian dish that filled the kitchen with garlic and herbs. He served it with a flourish, smiling at me across the table as though we were family already. I forced myself to taste it, though every bite felt heavy. Trying to sound casual, I asked, "So, Nathan, you're from the East Coast originally?" Without hesitation, he replied, "Boston. I moved around for work, though. Los Angeles, Phoenix, Nashville." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. He had just recited the exact trail Sandra had uncovered. My pulse quickened, but I smiled politely and set the fork down. The next morning, Lauren arrived at my house, arms crossed and jaw tight. "Mom, we need to talk. Nathan told me how you questioned him. He said you practically interrogated him." "I was only making conversation," I said softly. Her eyes blazed. "No, you were looking for reasons not to trust him. You always do this. Why can't you just be happy for me?" The words stung worse than any slap. I realized Nathan was already doing what predators always do, driving a wedge between me and the one person I was trying to protect. I knew pushing harder would only drive Lauren further away, so I tried a different approach. I called Nathan directly and invited him to lunch, framing it as an apology for my behavior at dinner. He accepted immediately, his tone warm, almost triumphant, as if he had finally won me over. We met at a quiet restaurant downtown. I arrived early, choosing a table in the corner with my back to the wall. When Nathan walked in, he looked every bit the part of a successful businessman: pressed shirt, polished shoes, that effortless smile. He leaned down to kiss my cheek like we were old friends. "I owe you an apology," I began, folding my hands on the table. I realize I came across as suspicious. It wasn't fair to you." Nathan's eyes softened, and he gave a rehearsed sigh. "I understand. After all, Sarah is your only daughter. But I promise, Eleanor, my intentions are pure." Then, almost casually, he told me about a woman from his past. She was older, grieving, and I failed her. I thought I could help, but I hurt her instead. I still regret it. He was describing me. He knew exactly who I was, yet he spoke as if it were a tragic love story, rather than the theft that had nearly destroyed me. I listened carefully as Nathan leaned closer, lowering his voice as though sharing something intimate. "That mistake from years ago shaped me," he said. "I swore I would never let it happen again. When I met Lauren, I saw a chance to make things right." His eyes glittered, and for a moment I caught a glimpse of the cold calculation behind them. By giving her everything I couldn't give that other woman: security, protection, stability. She will never question her future with me because I'll manage it for her. I forced a nod, though my stomach churned. "So you believe redemption comes from control?" He smiled faintly. "Love is control, Eleanor. Protecting someone means guiding every decision so they don't stumble into pain. Some people call it controlling. I call it saving them from themselves." The words sent a chill down my spine. He was painting domination as devotion, possession as protection. And Lauren, blinded by love, could not see the difference. I excused myself shortly after, but as I walked out of the restaurant, my hands shook. Nathan wasn't planning to disappear this time. He was planning to own Lauren completely, body, mind, and future. By then I knew I was out of my depth. Charming liars I could recognize, but this was bigger, darker, and far more dangerous. Sandra agreed. "We need more than suspicions," she told me. "We need law enforcement." That was how I met Special Agent Thomas Avery from the FBI. He was in his early 40s, calm but direct, the kind of man who didn't waste words. When Sandra introduced us, he spread a series of files across his desk. Each contained names I already knew: Aisha Patel, Monica Delgado, Paige Turner. "We've been tracking this man under several aliases," Avery explained. "Nathan Cole is only the latest. He is suspected of romance fraud, interstate identity theft, and possibly more. Every victim fits the same pattern: rapid romance, sudden engagement, financial consolidation, and then, accidents." My throat went dry. Accidents. Avery nodded grimly. "Within 18 months of contact, nearly every woman has either vanished or died under circumstances that appear natural: falls, car crashes, sudden illness. Statistically, it's almost impossible for that many coincidences to be real." Hearing it framed so bluntly made my knees weak. This wasn't just about money anymore. Lauren's life was in danger. The FBI needed more evidence, but we all agreed Nathan's ego could be used against him. So we set a trap. With Jenna's help, word spread that I had taken a small fall at home. Nothing serious, just enough to keep me resting for a few days. It made me seem fragile, less of a threat. That evening my phone rang. Nathan's voice was full of concern. "Eleanor, I heard about your accident. Are you all right?" "I'll be fine," I said softly, "just embarrassed." "Nonsense. Family looks after family. Let me bring you something. I make a good chicken noodle soup." The next day he arrived at Jenna's apartment, where I was staying. He walked in carrying a pot, smiling like the perfect son-in-law. Hidden recording devices were already running. He ladled soup into a bowl with exaggerated care, sliding it in front of me as if it were medicine. "You need to take care of yourself," he said warmly. "Sarah's happiness depends on you being well." I sipped politely, forcing a smile even as every instinct screamed that his kindness was calculated. Nathan wasn't here to nurture me. He was here to measure how close I was to becoming irrelevant. Nathan settled into the chair across from me, his tone gentle, almost soothing. "You know, Eleanor," he began, "life has a way of reminding us how fragile we are. One slip on the stairs, one moment of dizziness, and everything changes." I nodded carefully, saying nothing. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "If something were to happen to you, another fall, a health scare, Lauren would need someone strong at her side. Someone to guide her through the grief and protect her future." The message was clear, wrapped in velvet but sharp as glass. He was not simply planning to separate Lauren from me emotionally. He was imagining a future where I was gone entirely. When he finally left, promising to check in the next day, I felt my whole body shaking. The recordings captured his words, but when Agent Avery reviewed them later that night, he shook his head. "It's suggestive, but not direct enough. In court, his lawyer would say he was just expressing concern about your health. Sandra folded her arms. So we wait until he makes a bigger move. Avery's jaw tightened. Yes, but if he follows his pattern, that move is coming soon. Very soon. The next morning, Agent Avery called me into his office. His tone was firm, but his eyes carried the weight of urgency. We cannot wait for him to strike first. If we do, we may lose Lauren. We need him to incriminate himself clearly, and the only way to do that is through confrontation. I felt my stomach twist. You want me to face him alone? Not alone, Avery assured me. You'll be wired for sound. My team will be stationed outside his apartment, ready to move in. Your job is to make him believe you've figured everything out, that you're about to tell Lauren. His pride won't let him stay quiet. He'll brag or threaten. That's when we'll have him. Sandra squeezed my hand across the table. It's risky, but it may be the only chance. I nodded slowly. If it protects Lauren, I'll do it. That night, Jenna confirmed that Lauren would be out of town for a legal conference. The timing was perfect. We marked Saturday evening for the operation. As the day approached, I could hardly sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Nathan's smile, too polished, too confident, and I prayed it would be the last time I ever saw it. Saturday evening arrived, and I could feel my pulse pounding all the way to Nathan's apartment. The FBI van idled a block away, the microphone taped beneath my blouse warm against my skin. Every step up the stairwell felt heavier than the last. When he opened the door, he looked relaxed, dressed in casual clothes, like a man with nothing to hide. "Eleanor," he said smoothly, "what a surprise. Come in." I walked past him, forcing calm into my voice. "We need to talk." His expression sharpened, a flicker of awareness passing through his eyes. "About what?" "I know who you really are," I said. 7 years ago you called yourself Daniel Price. You stole $78,000 from me." For a moment his mask slipped, the smile faltered, the warmth drained, and something colder surfaced. Then, just as quickly, the charm returned. "That's quite an accusation." I didn't flinch. "I also know about Phoenix, Nashville, Denver. About Aisha, Monica, Paige." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Even if you tell Lauren, it won't matter. She already signed the paperwork transferring her trust fund to a joint account. Monday morning, I'll have access to everything." That was the moment the FBI needed. The door burst open, agents flooding the room. "Nathan Cole, you are under arrest." Nathan barely flinched as the agents cuffed his wrists. That same confident smirk clung to his face, as though he still held the upper hand. "You're too late, Eleanor," he muttered. "By the time Lauren realizes what happened, the money will already be gone." But a calm voice cut through the chaos. "Actually, you're the one who's too late." Lauren stepped into the apartment, flanked by 2 more agents. Her eyes were blazing, her voice steady. "I never signed anything. Those documents you waved in front of me were fake props supplied by the FBI. My trust fund is exactly where it belongs." For the first time, Nathan's confidence cracked. His mouth opened, but no words came. 2 years later, he was sentenced to life in federal prison under his real name, Marcus Webb. Testimony from victims across the country painted a clear picture of a predator who had perfected the art of manipulation. Lauren went on with her life, wiser and stronger. And I, at 65, finally learned that protecting family is not always about shielding them from truth. Sometimes it is about standing beside them, teaching them to fight back. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and comment where you are watching from. Your voice matters, and it may help someone else see the red flags in time.